So it's Saturday the 16th of September. We're in Elgins Coppice in Hatfield Forest, and we're going to walk the guided walk route as is set out as part of the event today. This is the first tree we see. This is a very old coppiced hornbeam here in front of us, and on the left hand side are some of the protective baskets that are built around the stumps to stop damage by deer. And on the right hand side here are various eco piles. This is wood that is not only good for logs but is good for invertebrates as it rots down steadily. Here is a pile of mixed what's called cordwood, cut into 2-metre lengths, various sorts, elm, hornbeam and hazel. And the first stand here is the old tools stand with a demonstration. Here's a shave horse and some collection of tools, old woodland type tools, and some chainsaws and some relics of the past, some large crosscut saws. We are going along the track that's been mown out for the guided walk, and we're coming up to the Stort Valley Nature Group tent, which is the biozone, and in there will be a little bit of a display of what we do with some of the members here inside the biozone tent. And we've got a display of some of the things that the members used to get up to in the 1930s. And on the board here we've got some of the old characters of the old society and display of natural history items, and a comparison with what we do today. And incidentally, so here is one of the old collections of moths in particular, the thing that members used to specialise in doing. And to the right hand side here, this is a vasculum which was used for collecting plants. But we're now approaching the area here where the American Air Force were in the Second World War, and on the right hand side here where all these nettles are, there's a sort of a mound, and we believe that this used to be a fire station. There is a fire hydrant there, but it's now all the brickwork is breaking down and it's turned into nature. So continuing through, following the trains, a very old hornbeam stool here, and then here is an ash tree which has got a massive limb, a massive horizontal limb, which is threatening to break off at any time, I suspect. This is sweet chestnut regenerating in front here. And what you notice now is where the light is admitted by coppicing, we're getting the development of a ground flora. And these stools in front of us here were coppiced several years ago, and you can see the good level of regeneration on them. But we're now approaching the area here where the American Air Force were in the Second World War, and on the right hand side here where all these nettles are, there's a sort of a mound, and we believe that this used to be a fire station. There is a fire hydrant there, but it's now all the brickwork is breaking down and it's turned into nature. So continuing through, following the trains, a very old hornbeam stool here, and then here is an ash tree which has got a massive limb, a massive horizontal limb, which is threatening to break off at any time, I suspect. This is sweet chestnut regenerating in front here. And what you notice now is where the light is admitted by coppicing, we're getting the development of a ground flora. And these stalls in front of us here were coppiced several years ago, and you can see the good level of regeneration on them. In the distance there are a pile of cordwood waiting collection, and then in the foreground you see a selection of the ground flora, and here there's wolfsbane, but there's also dog's mercury, lots of tree seedlings, thistles. So this is what happens when light is admitted by coppicing. And in front of us here is a really well regenerated hazel. There were several years into the coppicing cycle here, and you can see now how the massive burst or spring of shoots from the stump. Here is a large sweet chestnut. We believe the sweet chestnuts were planted in an attempt to turn this part of the woodland into some kind of arboretum in Victorian times. And next to it is a splendid standard oak. And next to that is a really large standard hornbeam. They're standards because they have been left to grow into mature trees. In front here is a field maple on the wood bank, typical wood bank tree, and we're now swinging round into the what they call the grass phase. This is Dischampsia wavy hairgrass, and this is typical of this stage of the coppicing cycle. And on the left here is a veteran sallow or goat willow, and it's coppicing practice not to cut these down. They're very good for biodiversity, but to leave trees like this just to decay naturally.
Low down in an old hornbeam with rotten heartwood there was what we thought was a hornet's nest, but it turned out to be a wild bee's nest which was being predated by hornets.
We're moving on through the cycle now, and we're starting to enter what's called the bramble phase. And you can see here there's bramble and male fern. We've got various small seedling trees, a little bit of blackthorn coming in, and these stumps will have been coppiced probably about 8 or 10 years ago now. Here is a group of 3 oak trees, and it wouldn't be normal for them to grow in a clump like this, so the chances are this is an old coppice stool which has rotted in the centre and has now become 3 separate distinct trees. Now these are very large mature hornbeam trees, and they were left during World War II to provide camouflage cover for the bomb stores that were in this particular coppice. And the route now bears left, and we're heading out towards the new coppicing area that we shall visit just briefly. This, just out of interest, is a little bit of an experiment on our part. Some years ago, a very large standard oak was felled, and ordinarily that they would not regenerate, but it showed signs of sprouting, so we covered it round with blackthorn. And if we look here, we can see that this is several years ago now, but it has actually thrown up quite a lot of nice oak shoots. There we are. So whether or not it will completely regenerate and survive, nobody really knows, but at least it's showing a lot of signs of much better health, and is very surprising from a large stump like this. Here is one of the deadwood piles that was left, one of the eco piles that was left, and you can see now that this must have been lying here 8 years or so, and it's rotting right the way down, forming splendid deadwood habitat. And going on from here, we are now going to the edge of the coppice, and what we have in front of us here is a wood bank. Now, with the fence on top of it. Now, the wood bank would have been a boundary line, and it would have been dug by people who had rights to coppice in here. So they dug a ditch on the left hand side and heaped the earth up into a coppice bank that we see running along the top here. So this would have been a boundary marker for the coppice. And here is something as an interesting side point. This is an elm sapling, and it's been barked, and this has got to have been done by a fallow buck. So we're on 16th of September, and the forest bucks are already showing signs of interest in the rut. We're well into the coppicing cycle here, as you can see, with a lot of strong regeneration. And this particular section on the left here, we were working there in 2015. So we've got 7 or 8 years of regeneration, as can be seen in the distance. And while we're here, here is one of the magnificent coppiced oaks, which the forest is justly known. Trees like this have got to be many hundreds of years old and have probably been coppiced over many times. And here we are finally at the exit point to this walk, and you can see that the baskets that were built are now completely died down, and the canopy is starting to close, and the brambles, which were part of the cycle, are themselves now being subdued by the overhanging canopy. Now, coming out onto the road, and opposite us here is one of the tall larch trees. Once again, one of the trees that was almost certainly a Victorian or early 20th century planting in an attempt to make this some kind of arboretum. Now, at this stage, on the opposite side of the road from the working coppice, what we see here is more evidence of what happened in World War II. And these are the bases of the Nissen huts. The Nissen huts were erected here during World War II to store bombs in preparation for being taken to Stansted Airport for the American Air Force. These are all the old Nissen hut bases. This is on the right hand side of the road here now. This is one of the classic views that is always held up as being a splendid example of the results of coppicing as a form of woodland management. And you can see a whole lot of trees regenerating, young trees, standard trees, and in amongst it here in the distance is a large sweet chestnut, part of the exotic plantings. And when we get to this point here, we'll see another example of the specialised trees that we have in Hatfield Forest. And here's another one of the splendid coppiced oak trees, many centuries old. There we are, multi-stem coppice oak, and next to it is a large tree, exotic planting again. And if you want to make a comparison between coppiced woodland, such as we see here, and make a comparison with uncoppiced woodland, what you might refer to as derelict coppice, which is on the side here. Now this is derelict coppice. Just let this car go by and we'll have a look in there. So this is the derelict overshaded coppice. To give an idea of the comparison, the way that coppicing affects and benefits the woodlands. In the distance you can see one of the specialities of this part of the coppice, and that is these very tall and long and straight old man's beard or traveller's joy. And in these trees here you can see almost like forest lianas reaching up into the canopy. And just to finish off with, here is more of the old man's beard growing up into the canopy, and then you have here regenerated elm. Now elm is always a problem to know quite what to do with the coppice elm or not, but we do coppice elm, and if it's protected you can see that you get a lot of interesting and quite vigorous regrowth. There's a whole area of elm here, and in the foreground are the elm logs. And that completes the guided walk.